You said the world needs power, I won't disagree. There's heat in the ground and the wind runs free. You call nuclear the future, but it won't power itself. Nuclear relies on coal more than coal needs itself. You said crypto was coming and demand would explode, that AI would load what the grid couldn't hold. But SMRs stay delayed.
Hello, everybody.
No ground ever breaks, and the public pays out while the promise
Celebrate
remakes.
the show is for Albert Mitchell.
You said it's
passed
the
away.
hour, but the plan's still the same. The technology is analog from the Cold War days. There's no place for the waste, and yuccas refused. Vented dry cask containers.
It always takes me a minute to get up and running. My apologies. Yeah, we lost Albert. My goodness. He's been around forever. Bless his heart. We celebrate endless times here with him. Thank goodness he was around. He passed away on Thursday, 75 years old.
With a federal hand. Would you
Way too soon for... He was so active, right?
You call it advanced.
It is what it is. You can't change it.
I'm still chasing a fuel that should have stayed in the stone.
But he was an unbelievable supporter of what we do. He was highly articulated. He was fun. And he left thousands of comments on my videos over the years. So we're grateful for that. Here we go. We got a big show tonight. And his wife sent me the picture, but I'm not very good with the iPhone, so his daughter sent it to me through an email. And that's kind of how I pictured Albert too, right? He was very smart. He was very authentic. And he was honest about each story we covered, so we'll show you his picture again at the end of the show, because a lot of people might miss the beginning. So Trump got elected. He said they were going to do 50 to 70 gigawatts of geothermal. Everybody celebrated. Thank God, this is great. And now he's going to do... Well, I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition. We got 100 headlines showed up in the first 5 hours of the announcement that Trump had signed a waiver for the nuclear industry, a get out of jail free card for the nuclear industry. There are checks and regulations that really didn't exist, but now they really don't exist, which is just horrifying. And we got a couple of stories, one from the major story from the World Nuclear News. It gives us really insight to what he signed into legislation. And the original story that I read, and I was like, wait, what? I thought he was doing geothermal. That's why everybody was so happy after he got elected. So he's making a big mistake. We're going to articulate that tonight. We're going to cover those 100. It's about 102 stories. But I'm going to start off with some of this stuff, the legacy headlines of Fukushima, so you can see why we're opposed to Fukushima. Yeah, and so geothermal, we had celebrated that here, and let's get after the show tonight. I think it's a really good show because it's such an important subject where they just passed this law, the quadruple nuclear. If they're going to do it with small modular reactors by 2050, which is what they're saying, they're going to have to produce a small modular, like these are fairly big small modular reactors we're talking about, 300 megawatts. It's going to have to produce one every week in 1.4 weeks. Can you see the nuclear industry even producing a reactor? In the last 40 years, they've only produced 2. So I don't understand how they're going to do it. But It's really important. We got a lot of documentation on it that's they've released over the last 2 days. We just got to get through this first bit here to try to articulate why nuclear is not a great idea. University of Texas researchers, Fukushima release was so great that the radioactive fallout in Washington, D.C., or West Coast, were up to 100,000 times so-called normal is what's left over from weapons testing, so to speak, right? That there's a lot more released all the time they don't acknowledge. So they kind of stuck with this number of around in the 80s, I think it was, or something like this. They pulled this number out of the hat and they've been sticking with it ever since. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. The fuel rods are still splitting atoms. But anyway, let's get after it. So this was enough. By this number we're looking at here, you should have evacuated Washington permanently, for instance, and British Columbia, Canada. Because the numbers you're talking about are catastrophic numbers. As you'll see, it's a really informative show for everybody tonight. We might as well get after it. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we're definitely going to miss Albert around here. Holy smokes, that man was... and his wife told me, like, he done his best not to miss a show, and that he was always paying attention in case it came on early, and it was the best part of his day was hanging out with you guys. That's pretty cool. So he spent the last number of his years, last decade of his year anyway, with really good people, hanging out with really good people. So that's a good thing, isn't it? I think it is. I don't think a person can ask for any better than us. We're good people. So 14 prefectures were closed to America right away. They banned 14 prefectures, but so did 54 other countries for a decade. They should never lift its restrictions. The bags, they still got 30 million one-ton bags somewhere. They gave up picking up the bags when everybody stopped paying attention. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima in the weeks ahead. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet, and Trump now, the nuclear industry, wants to put another 1,000 reactors in the United States alone. So you only need another one of these to really seal the fate of all the species and the future of humanity, right? Could one day be considered the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet because it annihilates everything with replicating cells. And by the time you get through tonight, if you've never been here before, you'll be incredibly articulated on the reality of this stuff. Radioactive sulfur in California showed there was an ongoing criticality recurring chain reaction. Well, the sulfur, that's simply not true. And I don't like Gunderson because he refused to acknowledge the fuel pools blew up, among other things. So this is sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. Reactors, they make sulfur. It's true they do make sulfur, but they don't make sulfur on the scale that we've seen show up in North America. So the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, these spherical shapes are created through the enormous temperatures when they were spraying salt water on the reactors to manipulate, the remains of the buildings, because the reactors were ejected into the environment immediately. So like reactor 1, let me try to give you some context before we get rolling here. So this was the bottom part of the reactors were 190 feet tall. The small modular reactors going to build are going to be 240 feet tall. And so they're going to be bigger than this contraption. This was built to put around reactor 1 as a temporary solution to bring the radiation levels, emissions, down. Because a lot of reactor 1 had went China syndrome. The fuel pools burnt off right away. And the fuel pools were at the top of the buildings. There was, they always say there's 3 melter reactors. It's 36 reactor cores. At the top of the buildings were double fuel pools because you didn't have a repository in Japan anywhere else. They were stored. Decades of reactor cores were at the top of each of the buildings. So it was around 8 reactor cores. If you go into my short videos, you'll see right away a couple of clips from mainstream media that are about 30 seconds long, 40 seconds long, where they articulate the inventories of Reactor 4. Reactor 4 actually, officially, that never happened. That's the official story, according to the regulators and everybody else. So how are you going to trust them if they're not even willing to acknowledge Reactor 4 is gone? And why would you hide Reactor 4? Like, the fuel pools are gone from the top of the buildings. These were 190-foot buildings, 19-story buildings. Remember, they're 150 feet wide. You can see a guy stood up there. Just to try to give you context for when you're looking at the remains, because the remains, what you're looking at there is 1/4 of the reactor building's height. So Reactor 3, which was the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is now what they're going to produce on a massive scale, as you'll see coming out. And the plutonium mixed oxide fuel is a curse on humanity and the species because of the whole process. You have to release, like United Kingdom, Donneray and Sellafield, which used to be called Windscale, but they had a plutonium mixed oxide reactor meltdown. They're still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean. These are just catastrophic things we're talking about, by the way. Each of them is just heartbreaking what they got done to us. And so this cooked off much hotter than Reactor 4, clearly, when you look at it, right? Reactor, just remember, that was a 190-foot story building, 19-story building, 65-meter building. They're 150 feet wide. Remember, both of those reactors stacked on top of each other still wouldn't be as tall as the quarter frame that they were going to put around Reactor 1. There's 4 of these buildings gone, with a total of 36 reactor cores. Arkansas's milk at 300% above the EPA maximum contamination levels for just iodine 131. So for every iodine 131, there's 10 times more iodine 132 produced, 30 times more iodine 133 produced, 31 times more iodine 129 produced with a 15 million year half-life. There was 220 million atoms per liter of radioactive fallout of that in a Ottawa study, but they acknowledged that was the entire northern hemisphere. And the United States, Canada got brutalized. This stuff never goes away with a 15 million year half-life. So iodine 131 will produce 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133. And they're actually 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of all the species in humans than the incredibly effective 131 is. So there's significantly more just of those two, and there's 31 times more iodine 131, which was enough to saturate the thyroid glands of every species. This is why we're seeing a failure of all the insects and the keystone species, which is the trickle effect up the food chain is just, as the research expeditions we've done shown, horrific. My Geiger counter, by the way, is real time. 185, not 246, but 185 at a nuclear plant. It used to be an evacuation zone. I should evacuate my studio. And so the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs, the other isotopes, you can't get a glass of water without Fukushima radioactive fallout on this entire planet. It has contaminated all our fresh water and seawater. Putting more nuclear on the planet is certainly not a good solution. We're in a crisis. This planet is now in a crisis because of 14 years of radioactive hemorrhaging from Fukushima, but 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry from many different venues. Unprecedented spike, 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur. This was from spraying salt water on the reactors. A desperation that should have never taken place because of this particular facet of it. These are super hot particles, the sulfur peroxide. It's known as sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, and they're very mobile. They're super hot particles. There was another study showing this is the French government. This was a spike. This is not a conjecture. This is not a model. This is a fact. This is unassailable documentation from the French government, the IRSN. Now, it wasn't just 1 million times. It was 1 million to 10 million times the cesium-137 per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet, certainly Canada, United States. And cesium-137 pulses energy at the speed of light for 600 feet every second. So when you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, and cesium-137 is a gamma, when you got at least 2 of them, when they hit each other almost at the speed of light, because that's how much they pulse energy. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy, let alone at the speed of light every second, for millions of years. Nuclear is the only thing that does that. And so you can really trace the decline of all the species and the weather phenomena and the ocean destruction, freshwater phytoplankton extermination to the 80 years of the nuclear industry. You can see the whole cancer epidemics, the diabetes epidemics. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Explosions after each event worldwide. They do sex ratio studies on continents after, say, Chernobyl. After Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. So think about a Chernobyl happening in the United States. Do you really think the radiation travels to another country without polluting your own country? You really think that's worth having on your planet? The only redeeming quality it has is it doesn't. It attacks everything with replicating cells. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So why put it on your planet? Why would you have this on your planet? It's the wrong technology. Everybody knows that too. So 10 million times after Fukushima of cesium in North America, United States, and Canada. Massive radioactive releases at Fukushima going on for 3 years. So it's not like you have an explosion like a nuclear weapon. This stuff never stops hemorrhaging out. It's a perpetual disease factory forever. The visible steam, you need the right conditions to see it, are just the tip of the iceberg. The containment vessels weren't broken. They were complete loss of all the inventories. You ejected the reactor cores, and we're talking about 36 of them, out of the buildings in some cases, and deep into the earth in other cases where it burns at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and everything is cannibalizing each second for millions of years. We don't know how long. This doesn't need oxygen to burn, see? It's going to atomize in aerosol and ionize and radiate it, and that's going to be a catastrophic event for anything that breathes in or consumes it or drinks it. It's stupid. It shouldn't exist. This was another study of TEPCO's numbers, which were lowballed on a ridiculous scale. They didn't even acknowledge 1% of the emissions with this particular study. But this is Neptunium-239. It decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. And I'll show you why plutonium is a disaster coming up. Highly radioactive glass rained on Tokyo. 500 billion atoms per kilogram. 500 billion. Highly radioactive per atom. 500 billion atoms per kilogram. Multiply by 66 to get a square meter on the ground. Changes the understandings of the disaster. Building 1,000 of these in the United States alongside of Canada or on this planet is absurd. I don't think they can do it, but just the fact that they're now going to have free reign with very little checks and balances or regulatory agencies. They remove. It's like putting all the police on temporary leave for the next 40 years and only giving criminals guns. How do you think it's going to turn out for everybody else? The nuclear industry is a pure criminal racketeering. It should be taken down with the racketeering statutes. Radiation doses in Northeast and Great Lakes, which is why the racketeering statutes were created, exactly for the nuclear industry. People like the people in the nuclear industry are the worst offenders to humanity in the 8 million species. Radiation doses in the Northeast and the Great Lakes were equal to the West Coast after Fukushima. So nobody escaped this. No species. We poisoned all our drinking water, all of our farmers, all of our communities, the entire biosphere, we poisoned and destroyed the fungus and the bacteria in our soil with this stuff. Which is why you're having flash floods and massive forest fires, because the ground is tender dry, because you got rid of the basis of the ecosystem, right? The biodiversity that breaks down the foliage and the litter, you kill that with radioactive fallout. Fukushima was an event on top of 70 years of emissions at that point. U.S. government kept the worst-case Fukushima scenario secret from the public. Indeed, they did. And slowly but surely, information is leaked out and came out. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14% after Fukushima. There's 14.2% per 100,000 children need open heart surgery. I told that to a doctor a few weeks ago, and he's like, what? Holy shit! He couldn't believe it. That's across the entire country, not just Fukushima Prefecture. That's symmetrical throughout Japan. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. So like I told you earlier, it's not just cancers: heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. Cancer is typically latent, but in Fukushima, there was one street in Fukushima City, a shopping street, where 7 people dropped dead in the first year. It was 14,646 out of 38,200 children with thyroid tumors that were around 2 centimeters, which is the size of the. Also, on top of this, right, 6 out of 10 children with diabetes. So these all harbingers. If you ignore all of this, who do you blame ultimately? See, yourself, right? Not just cancer. How low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. Radiation precautions for areas near Seattle, Vancouver, Portland. Perhaps you need to wash your shoes. No, you don't wash your shoes. You throw them away. It wasn't. Perhaps it was a catastrophic event. Portland. There was this study was updated a week later, 2 weeks later. 20,000. There was a spike of in excess of 20,000 people dying of heart attacks. The researchers were able to show right away. But I mean, it's not just heart attacks, right? Babies were dying in British Columbia, Canada, and United States. There was a huge spike in infant mortality. So this was a plutonium-239 dispersal. Remember the model I showed you of the neptunium-239. That decays in 2.5 days to plutonium. This was a plutonium model based on TEPCO's numbers. So plutonium, 144 beagle dogs. The dogs typically died. There was 3 different tumors. Some of the dogs had all 3 tumors. But they all died. All 144 dogs died in 5.4 years. And 93 dogs, the most common cause of death, were bone tumors from the plutonium. So plutonium, and now bone tumors, of course, the fact that it's in your bones is mutating the stem cells. So when it's in the children and small mammals and animals, babies and that, it's mutating their stem cells. And so if that's happening, then you're mutating their hormones from the thyroid gland too. And when you're developing, growing, and of course, humans, we take a long time to reach adulthood, so we do a lot of growing during developing, right? So there's catastrophic health consequences for that. But what's crazy about this story is that the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. Don't worry about the alpha. Worry about the fact that it's the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod. So you hear iodine, you hear cesium. Well, this needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And with plutonium, it killed all the animals. What you got to remember about this is that it was discovered the human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys that removed the plutonium. So you're not 50% double. You're 50 times more likely to die from bone tumors, lung tumors, and liver tumors. You might die of 3 just from the plutonium. And there was plenty of plutonium. Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium after 2.5 days. But I showed you all these other isotopes that are documented all the way up to here, right? It's not just one isotope we're talking about. We're talking about a catastrophic event. So why would you build 1,000? We got great stories, incredible stories that came out. There was over 100 of them showed up in 6 hours from all the usual suspects, right? The shakers and movers in the media. TEPCO done nothing for 2 years to stop the highly radioactive Fukushima water. Well, the airborne covers the planet typically 20 to 30 days. All the studies have shown 20 to 30 days radioactive fallout. The entire planet's covered. This model is 20 days. We're almost down there now. Fukushima Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stacks. So not just the reactor, but those tall, skinny stacks on the side. You can't get near that, so how are you going to get near the reactor? How does that work? Where's the mechanics, the science? How can the stacks be so hot you can't get near them, but you can go to the reactor? Well, you can't. A meltdown means you can't go near it forever. That's what a meltdown means. But it has many, many other facets that are terrifying and frightening. Radiation around Fukushima near the levels where humans vomit uncontrollably, and their hair can be stripped from their body. Tokyo governor finds iodine-131 levels. Now, we covered this story. We audited Harvard University, Stanford University, MIT University a couple of weeks ago, 3 separate videos, where if they told a lie, we stopped the video of their presentation from Fukushima and then showed the documentation that they had misrepresented or blatantly lied, and then we played the video again. Sometimes we would stop the video 3 times in a sentence to explain a lie. Harvard University acknowledged 10 kilometers away from Fukushima was lethal doses of multiple sieverts, airborne in the plume. So this is why they evacuated people, because they wouldn't find a bunch of dead bodies in the houses, because that would spook everybody on the planet. That would be the end of the nuclear permanently, right? So the only reason if they thought they were just going to get cancer and die a few years later, they'd leave them there, like they're doing right now, right? They're moving them back into the nuclear wasteland as fast as they can. Hair can be stripped from the body. Well, there is no nuclear science went there and quantified that. They're not going there. We're almost down to the first story here. We've got 4 more after this one, I think. Tokyo government finds iodine-131 levels up to quadruple the cesium levels in the water reclamation facilities. So the water filtration facilities, in the first year, there was just one of these facilities, had 50,000 one-ton bags of sediment from the water filtration. It was so radioactive they wanted TEPCO to take it, and TEPCO said, no, we're not taking it. And TEPCO at that time was nationalized, was the Japanese government, right? I just want to, this will help you appreciate what a nuclear reaction means. You can't drink your water, and you can't get rid of the sediment. You can't get rid of the sewage. Once you dehydrate it, you can't get rid of it because there's absurd numbers, and they're only acknowledged in cesium-137 in this particular one, which is typical of the industry. They refuse to acknowledge the other isotopes. Their legacy is criminal. Every one of them should be, who retired from the nuclear industry, should be tried for crimes against humanity and crimes they committed wherever they were too. It's easy to quantify the crimes. But the lies they tell, they can be taken down with the racketeering statutes. High levels of radioactive material in Tokyo, 170,000 atoms a kilogram. So when you see a BQ, that's a pulse of energy every second. And you need an atom to make that happen, a physical isotope pulsing energy at the speed of light each second for that to happen, see? To have the so-called Becquerel. So when something pulses energy at the speed of light, the only thing that does it is it's called a man-made isotope. It's not created by the solar system, so we don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Our bodies don't know what it is. So we'll attack it for the rest of our life with white blood cells and build a sarcophagus around it. That's all animals and humans. That's their response to anthropogenic man-made radiation in your body is you have a decrease of red blood cells for the rest of your life. And the more you get into you, the worse it becomes, right? And of course, when you do that, then your immune system is going to be compromised for the rest of your life because you're producing so much white blood cells, right? So you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. All of a sudden are catastrophic to your health. You're more important than they are, trust me. 170,000 becquerels a kilogram in slag. Slag is sewage. It's dehydrated sewage. North America will not be safe from Fukushima if the plant keeps leaking. These weren't leaking, as I showed you earlier. The buildings were literally gone. These pictures late 2012. And remember, they covered all of this up. Those 2 buildings, just bear with me. I got them right there just in the wrong order. Here we go. So reactor 3 is to your left and reactor 4 is to your right. So reactor 4 is the first one you're going to see. To put this cover over, and normally with Japan you can't download a picture from their media after I found this picture. So this was a wide shot, but it was absurd high quality. And I was able to download it. It was like this huge file downloading. I was like, oh shit, is that a virus, I wonder? And I stopped it, and then I realized it was the picture. So I downloaded it again, multiple times actually, and I was able to zoom in and extrapolate these types of pictures and these types of pictures. And what you're seeing is there is no building. This cover was put on it to trick you into thinking that they had control of it and they were inside of it. They simply couldn't have been. Look at the debris right alongside of it. And so after that, you weren't able to extrapolate, take a picture from the Japanese websites, the mainstream media. And recently, we just noticed that hundreds and hundreds of the tanks are missing, but they have never explained it. They said they only started releasing the water, but tanks that are missing surpasses their alleged, their official story, which is crazy to suggest nothing got out of Fukushima. Iodine-131 detected in Tokyo multiple locations, which means there's ongoing nuclear emissions, meltdowns. 350 atoms per kilogram at the garbage facility. I'll bring this together right now. And incineration. So every nuclear plant in America has incinerators where they're burning legally, not safe, but legal amounts of radiation into your environment. It's not safe amounts. It's legal because no one paid attention and they changed the laws to make it legal. But it's not safe. So if you're going to put another 1,000 nuclear reactors in the United States, that's another 1,000 incinerators burning radioactive debris. It's another 1,000 pipes into your rivers, your lakes, your estuaries where they're located, and the oceans, hemorrhaging radiation because they're legally allowed to dump radiation every day. And the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. So I don't know if America got enough farmland for nuclear power plants because that's where they usually put them. Almost every single one in the United States is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. Okay, so let me explain this again. You can't get rid of the sediment from the water filtration facilities. You can't get rid of the sewage because it's so radioactive. You can't get rid of the garbage because it's so radioactive. If you do, you can't get rid of the ashes because it's so radioactive. That's the definition of hell. And stupid. Animals suddenly died on the west coast after Fukushima. The whole world noticed this strange phenomenon. And I showed you the radioactive fallout plumes and everything else, right? All right, here we go. That was the preamble, believe it or not. And that's so important. Nuclear stocks surge after Trump signs an order to boost the industry. My goodness. So I was reading this story and I was like, well, wait, what? What am I looking at? And I said, okay, well, I might as well give a free Nobel Peace Prize with every orders of fries and shrimp from here on out. It's cheaper to give... Shares of nuclear power companies closed higher on Friday after U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order seeking to jumpstart the industry. And the orders direct the nation's Independent Nuclear Regulatory Commission to cut down on all regulations, as you'll find out. The order directs the nation's Independent Nuclear Regulatory Commission to cut down on regulations and fast-track new licenses for reactors and power plants. And basically, the next story will articulate that a bit better for you. They're talking about small modular reactors, which doesn't even exist. You have to develop it, so why not just develop the geothermal and be done with it? You don't need gas, oil, and coal or nuclear if you develop geothermal. U.S. power consumption estimated to reach record high after stagnating for 2 decades. Well, why would it reach a record high? You're exporting, you're kicking people out of your country. You're not bringing them into your country, so why should it escalate? As power-hungry data centers dedicated to artificial intelligence and crypto miners plug into the grid. So, but why would you use nuclear? There's lots of better solutions. Geothermal. And then you back it up with wind and solar, and you have storage for peak power hours, like lava rocks and sand, and pumped hydro, where you just compress air into mine shafts and store energy that way. And the heat from compression can be stored for months at a time in sand and lava, hot rocks. Like go to Iceland and just chop out all the lava rocks you ever dreamt of. Stuff will hold temperatures, enormous temperatures for months and months on top of that. And so the justification we're hearing right from the get-go of artificial intelligence was the only solution was need a lot more nuclear, Dana. Yeah, but there's other stuff. No, we don't like that. We like nuclear only. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Shares of uranium mining companies all spiked. These people don't have a product. They don't have reactors, small modular reactors. There's no way to get for the investors to make any money. Like after a couple of weeks, this will drop back down right away. And we've seen them do it lots of times for fusion stories where they said they have ignition a couple of years ago, just before Christmas. And billions of dollars was invested right away on unsuspecting investors. And they all lost their money. That's the same thing's going to happen to anybody that just invested in these companies. They're going to lose their money because the 14 biggest financial institutions at Conference of Parties 29, United Nations last year, had brought them on board, and they were going to fund nuclear. We weren't sure how they were going to do it. What they're doing is they're buying temporary shares, by the millions, by the way, for 2 or 3 weeks in small modular reactor companies who are on the stock market but doesn't have a small modular reactor, don't have an application into the regulatory agencies. And we've gave them all the money they ever wanted. Nuclear industry. We gave them free pass on everything. In fact, NuScale didn't even have a full application and they gave them a license anyway. They still didn't produce nothing. We've seen this over and over and over. They don't produce anything. 90% of the money then is stolen through administration. And like ultra-safe nuclear, they just go bankrupt after they steal millions of dollars of investors' money, who worked all their life for that money and was hoping to be able to enjoy the rest of their life. And it was stolen from them by the nuclear industry. And we see these Ponzi schemes every 3 or 4 weeks. So reactor 3, the fuel pools were at the top of the building. There is no top to the buildings. All the reactors they're going to build are going to be these plutonium mixed oxide reactors. And they cook off about 200,000 degree hotter temperatures than a typical disastrous nuclear meltdown. Like reactor 4 at Fukushima, which the official story is that never happened. But you tell me, did that happen? Did that really happen? So when you look at that reactor 3, like the building's gone. The fuel pool's 8 reactor cores and the fuel pools at the top of the buildings is gone. There's another 8 reactor cores at the top of reactor 4. It's gone. Well, what did the North American CNN included and CBS? Let me play this little video clip. All claim they're at the top of a building in a fuel pool that doesn't even exist, which is reactor 4. The picture will get a bit better. So to be where they're too, they have to be above those red fuel pools you see at the top of the buildings. They have to be way above that to look down on that building. I'll be right back. Here we go.
What I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So that was ABC Cecilia Vega behind me. She's currently a correspondent at the White House with Trump press conferences. As Seth Dorn, he's a senator's son, United States, PBS and CBS. This is CNN. This is the same media out there promoting, the same people, by the way, but they're promoting nuclear right now. These people are claiming they're up here at the very top of this building. I made this that little video in 2013, the end of 2013. Nuclear is considered a cleaner source of fuel. Nuclear is the most resource intensive, not just to build it, which takes a decade and a half or more, but just in order to get your hands on, just bear with me so you can appreciate it, because we got a lot to get through. And we're still early. We're still such an important video in many ways. I'm probably going to cover it more this week, because the stories, they're shoving this down everybody's throat right now. I don't see how the industry, as you'll see, will help articulate it. I can't see how the industry can pull off, and we're going to get, the next story we'll get in a bigger detail. Just bear with me here. I want to show you what the fuel cycle looks like. And we're almost there, I would imagine. I'm not sure where it's to. It's right. I know, I'm in the right folder, but it just takes a few moments. There we go. It just takes a few moments to populate the page. So just to get the uranium-235 out of the uranium-238 out of the ground, is the whole process to get it to fuel for the reactor is the most polluting, disgusting process imaginable. And I almost got it here. I just want to do it justice, that's all, to tell the story, right? Here we go. Here's another example. So uranium mine is absurd, but they use chemical ponds just to get to 238. Then to get to 235 is insanity. The milling, the conversions, the gas, the stuff left over, the fabrication, and finally into the reactor is the most toxic process imaginable. So the reactor never stops producing hideous amounts, utilizing hideous amounts of resources, and each reactor is dependent upon 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. Because the reactor, each reactor, and say a site got 4 or 5 or 6 reactors, each reactor needs 1 million gallons, 4,500 tons a minute. So you're talking about 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks going past your house every minute, 70 a second. So imagine 70 automobiles, 70 one-ton trucks with 1,000 liters in the back of it, headed for a reactor every minute or second. So imagine 4,500 a minute, 1,440 minutes a day, etc., etc. Right? So these are resource of intensive, just to cool the reactor, not counting all the. It has to run the entire site, and reactors do not power their own sites. Some people say, well, they can, but they don't. That's the most important facet of it, is they don't. So then, therefore, they can't. And more reliable than wind and solar, which is a garbage can diagnosis. What about geothermal? And Trump promised 50 to 70 gigawatts, which is 50 to 70 large reactors, or up to 90, was it, actually, of gigawatts of geothermal. And it's, which, like, if you're going to spend a massive amount in UR to develop the so-called small modular reactors, which is coming up in 2 more, and then that story right there, which is 2 more clicks. So you got all these companies where they're NuScale and Sam Altman, they don't have applications into the regulatory agencies for a license. And now that you've removed all the rules, all the regulations, made it stupid simple, they're still not going to have an application, because that's not, they can't make any money by going ahead and trying to build a reactor. They can make money through speculation only. And Sam Altman is going to be in court because of what he'd done to his sister for a decade when she was a kid. And sick, twisted. And look at all the people on this short story that got their name on it. Look at that. It's absurd, isn't it? That was only a short story. This one's a bit longer. They actually got a name on this story, which is unusual for this lobbying, pro-nuclear lobbying group. World Nuclear News. Trump sets out aim to quadruple U.S. nuclear capacity. I blew up laughing when I heard that. Then I seen like there's over 100 headlines. We're going to, after this story, we're going to go through the 100 headlines, just the headlines only, because that's fun. I love doing stuff like that, by the way. FDA import alert. The United States bans agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures in Japan. It'd be the equivalent to banning half of United States food because your nuclear power plant broke down. Due to Fukushima radionuclides. Concern over contamination spreading to most countries around the Pacific. Well, it was nightmarishly worse than that. The plume covered the planet in all the studies in about 20 days to 30 days tops. That was the consensus of the academic community, the government agencies worldwide. Trump sets out aim to quadruple. This is coming from the World Nuclear News, but it's one of the few stories where they went into great detail, which is interesting because they done it right away. Trump. Here we go. The aim is to increase the United States nuclear capacity from 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts. I blew up laughing when I say that one. By 20, because you'd have about 1,000 plus small modular reactors. First off, you don't got enough farmland to put up another 100, let alone 1,000. Because that's where you want to put them to, so the emissions end up getting moved away when the farmers are harvesting their food, right? I'm not kidding you, by the way. This is almost every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. Not gas plants or oil plants or coal plants. It's all reserved for the nuclear industry worldwide. You'll see the same thing. The aim is to, because they hate your guts so much, or they love you so much, they love to kill you. The aim is to increase U.S. nuclear energy capacity from 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts by 2050 in 25 years. They expect to have 3 up by next year, in July. I was like, well, you people are insane. 300. So say each reactor is 300 megawatts. Small modular reactor. Or no, I'm sorry, 300 in 25 years. You got to build 12 a year. They're typically at 0.84 gigawatts per large reactor. So these are large reactors. You got to build 12 a year. That's one every month. One large reactor a month. And Watts Bar took them 40 years, 42 years or something to build. The two they just built were 17 years to build them. How are you going to build a reactor? A large reactor. So it turns out they're depending on small modular reactors, which would work out to 1,000. But that's if you're going to have like the Canadian boiling water reactor X, the Hitachi BWR-X 300. The boiling water reactor X300 is what it's called. These are 240-foot buildings. These are not small modular reactors you're going to build in the factory and stick on a truck, okay? These are 50 feet taller than Fukushima's reactor. They're 50 feet taller than Fukushima reactors. So the base of them are going to be bigger than this base right here. You can see Buddy stood up there. You can see how big these buildings are. Hey, like these are 100. These are 24-story buildings. I'll bring up some pictures of 24-story buildings for you. And even then, it's hard to appreciate what you're looking at, right? 24-story building. Yeah, we lost Albert. My goodness. That blows my mind. I'm so used to him, right, all these years. And, he's 75, but he was active as frig, man. He generally never had a bad word for anybody or anything. Except for nuclear, he might have a few. But even then, he was pretty conservative. He was just adamant that nuclear was a terrible thing on your planet. So the new small modular reactors are bigger than Fukushima. They're the equivalent of a 24-story building, but half of them are underground. Half of them are underground. So they're not small, and they're not modular. They're massive skyscrapers, right? They're 24-story buildings. So you're gonna have to build 1.4 a week. You're going to have to build 40 a year of small modular reactors and plutonium mixed oxide small modular reactors for Trump's initiative of another 300 gigawatts. In nuclear, where are you going to put 1,000 reactors in the United States? Now, these are not small, man. But let's just say they're you got to build 1.4 a week. These are 300 megawatts. These are huge reactors. The small modular reactors are like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 megawatts. These are 300 megawatts. You still got 1,000 to build in 25 years, 40 a year. 40 a year. Nuclear industry, who steals 90% of all the money, and on top of all the Superfund cleanup sites, the same thing, for all these projects. 90% of the money it gets sucked into the administration system. The aim is to increase U.S. nuclear energy capacity from 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts. That's not even a pipe dream. Is it meant just to rob the investors, or what is it meant? I wonder. It's just simply impossible. They don't have the workforce. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the supply chain, and you're talking about 1 million corporations. You got to create 1 million corporations to actually bring it to fruition. That's what it took the last time. We now face a new set of challenges, including a global race to dominate in artificial intelligence. Why is there a challenge? Why you got to dominate? When does the dominant end? How do we end that pipe dream there? And why do we need nuclear to do it in the first place? If they want energy, they can build their own friggin' energy. They don't. Why should we, the entire species and the planet and the future of humanity, the 8 million species, be put in jeopardy? It aims to strengthen the domestic fuel cycle. Of course, yeah, that's the basis of the infrastructure. If you can't do nothing without which is plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in the United States, which is illegal in Canada. So I'm assuming they just changed the laws to make it illegal. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but they do allude to it, I think, coming up. Recommend national policy to support the management of spent nuclear fuel. A national policy, so a consensus to support the management of spent nuclear fuel. It was still splitting atoms into the environment. You can't contain it for 4, 5, 6 decades for each fuel you take out of the reactor. It's still splitting atoms with no containment. You're talking about, if you could see what's happening right now with 1,000 fuel pools, imagining adding another 1,000 fuel pools to that pollution cycle on our planet. Like each fuel pool, here's what a fuel pool does in 30 days in radioactive fallout. This is what Fukushima, by the way, done. This is the French government study, not a projection, but a study of radioactive fallout from Japan. But every fuel pool does this in 30 days. So it's like an invisible snowstorm that creeps, and we're only talking about we're almost at day 20. We're at day 20 right there. That's day 20 of radioactive fallout. This stops at day 31. So every fuel pool does this. You got 1,000 of them worldwide, and that's why you see a mass extinction event worldwide, because Fukushima was a pulse event on top of everything that's been going on for 80 years. What they've done, it's 80 years of assault upon every species, and now we're compromised. The future of humanity and all the species are now 100% compromised because we had a massive pulse event release into our environment and now you're just going to, saturate the entire planet with nuclear plutonium mixed oxide disease factories and high-level waste. Nuclear fuel is high-level waste, but high-level waste is still splitting atoms too. And development and deployment of the advanced fuel cycle capabilities, which is plutonium mixed oxide fuel, to establish a safe, secure, and sustainable long-term fuel cycle. There is no safe. And how can you secure plutonium mixed oxide fuel? When you look at the facilities, like La Hague in France has 500 security guards. But nobody's going to steal high-level fuel. That's just to keep you away with Geiger counters and noticing that all the species are missing in those areas. Right? It's meant to protect them, not you. This includes recommendations for the efficient use of the uranium plutonium, which clearly they're talking about plutonium mixed oxide fuel, reclaiming uranium plutonium, which is the most resource intensive and polluting thing you could possibly do. It's an abomination. The reason they don't do it for decades and decades is because the pollutions is just ridiculous. France, La Hague site, and United Kingdom's the Donerae in Scotland and Windscale, which is now known as Sellafield, reprocessing facilities. We've done presentations on just academic studies showing that contaminated the Arctic and Europe from the emissions, from the reprocessing. Imagine now having that over here on our continent. We don't do it on our continent because it's established a long time ago. This is absurd. We do it experimentally at the degenerate Los Alamos National Laboratories, which is one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. And they spent, almost $100 million trying to mitigate it. The pollution that's gone down into the aquifer, they can't contain it. I'm going to turn it down so you don't hear me making a big racket here. Probably still going to make a racket anyway. Let's keep going here. Recommendations for the efficient disposal of waste generated by recycling or reprocessing through a permanent disposal pathway. Well, how come after 80 years you still haven't got a solution? They can't put it anywhere because it'll melt down. They can't leave it alone. And so they keep faking that they're going to come up with a solution. Recommendations for an efficient. Nuclear deserves prominence, not efficient. This is not like tin cans and pop bottles and cardboard, okay? This is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. Or reprocessing through a permanent disposal pathway generated by recycling. Recycling and reprocessing is the same thing. And the World Nuclear News knows that. But they write it right. Grammar's a weapon. You know that, obviously, right? Grammar's a terrible weapon. Hi, everybody. Let's keep rolling. It's also called a program to develop methods and technologies to transport domestically and overseas. Develop method and technologies to transport domestically and overseas used and unused advanced nuclear fuels. Used and unused advanced. So unused plutonium mixed oxide and used plutonium mixed oxide, I think, is what they're alluding to there. Like, everything is vented when you're moving it. If you contain it and then you go to vent it when you get somewhere, it'll detonate when you introduce oxygen back in. And it doesn't need a spark to detonate once you contain it. Within 190 days, the Energy Secretary shall develop a plan. 120 days. 4 months. To expand domestic uranium conversion capabilities and expand enrichment capabilities sufficient to meet projected civilian defense reactors' needs for low-enriched uranium. Well, what's the rush? You don't have an actual small modular reactor. So what's the rush? Like rushing that, this is not stuff you're supposed to rush, okay? You rush this stuff and you lose that part of your country permanently. And you hurt or contaminate tens of millions of people, and you lose large resources of fresh water. High enriched uranium, then high SA, and low enriched uranium, HALEU, subject to retentions of such stockpiles as are necessary for tritium production, which is for weapons. So they have to replenish the tritium 3H, not tritium, but tritium 3H. And putting tritium there is pretty deceptive, by the way, which is typical, though, for the World Nuclear News site. Naval propulsions and nuclear weapons. So what do they need tritium for? Oh, because they're using plutonium mixed oxide fuel in the submarines, folks. Did you know that? Tritium is for weapons. There will also be an end to the general surplus plutonium dilute and disposal program. An end to the surplus, so plutonium dilute, this is where they would mix it with gravel, allegedly, so it can never be recovered effectively. It's typical of plutonium is a gas, isn't it? And instead of a program will be established, I think, just another one of their lies maybe, will be established to dispose of the surplus plutonium by should they have none of these they have mastered yet. So in the next 120 days they're going to master this, really? Does anybody really appreciate the madness of what we're talking about? And making it available to the industry in a form that can be utilized for fabrication of fuel for advanced nuclear technologies. So they're not going to dispose of surplus plutonium. They're calling disposing of it by turning it into plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which doesn't get rid of it. You turn it into a breeder fuel now. Once you take it out of the reactor, now it's a friggin' nightmare. Which, by the way, the biggest byproduct of these irradiated fuel rods in the first place is curium, which is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. What do you think is happening to the plutonium? And we've already seen them, posturing about reclaiming the mixed oxide fuel, the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, putting that through a reclamation process, which is I've never even heard tell of. But it doesn't surprise me, because now you're producing isotopes we don't even have names for. This stuff is all splitting atoms once you take it out, and a lot of it you can't contain it. There will also be, during the reaction, you're burping off a lot of it all the time. There will also be Energy Defense Department work to assess the feasibility of restarting or repurposing closed nuclear plants as energy hubs for military microgrid support. It's completely selfish. It's all about the government and the military-industrial complex and destroying the biosphere, the air, the fresh water, killing the bacteria, the fungus, and all the soil worldwide. There's also a section on expanding nuclear energy workforce saying that within 120 days of the date of this order, this is fascinating stuff. The Idaho, which I hate their guts, by the way, cowards, National Laboratory's principal responsibility for constructing and testing new reactor designs. Canada skipped right past that. They're not even going to build a test design. They're just going to build one here in Ontario. It concluded construction of a new reactor in the 1970s. So they have no experience. They don't have a supply chain on top of that. They don't have the manpower or anywhere close to it or any hope of it. You're talking about 2 or 3. You're talking about 10 years to build a workforce. But they're going to get gobbled up by every plant. You need 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 people per nuclear plant. And it takes about 4 years to train a nuclear worker for construction to be proficient, because the nuclear industry criteria is the most resource-intensive industry, period. Everything's triply inspected. It says within 90 days of the date of the order, the Secretary shall take appropriate action to revise the regulations, guidance, and procedures and practices of the department, the national laboratories, and any other entity under the department's jurisdiction to significantly expedite the review, approval, deployment of small modular reactors under the department's jurisdiction. It's a mouthful. I'll do it again. Within 90 days, within 3 months, the Secretary shall take appropriate action to revise, change the regulations, change the guidance, change the procedures, change the practices of the department and national laboratories, and then any other entity under the department's jurisdiction. So everything, the entire infrastructure, to significantly expedite the review, approval. This is a recipe for just nightmares. We're going back to the Manhattan Project, right, where there was no rules and no regulations. That's what we're doing. And deployment of advanced reactors, which is the small modular reactors under the department's jurisdiction, that is now being stripped of any kind of regulatory process whatsoever. Yeah, I know that's going to work out really good. How can that work out good? Where's the redeeming qualities in that? The Secretary shall ensure that the department's expedited procedures enable qualified test reactors to be safely operational at the department-owned or department-controlled facility within 2 years following the submissions of a substantially complete application. Test reactors to be operational within 2 years. So the budget, like, you're going to have to increase the budget because 90% of the money is stolen by these goblins. So you're going to have to increase the price of the reactors fourfold too. So what they say they can do for $5 billion somewhere else is going to take $20 billion in the United States. That's not a good thing. It doesn't even make sense. A substantially complete application. So it doesn't have to be a complete application. It just has to be close. Leave out all the major parts. These people are insane. It's still not going to matter. The nuclear industry still can't build something. If there's no nuclear renaissance, you have the same gigawatts worldwide today as you had in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. It's completely fabricated. It's a total straw man. There will also be a pilot program established for reactor constructions operations outside the national laboratory with the goal of 3 reactors reaching criticality by 2026. What are you talking about? How are you going to get 3 reactors, new reactors built in 14 months? The 4th of July of all times. It doesn't matter how much money you got, that can't happen. They can't build 1 by the 4th of July, let alone 3. Right? There will also be a pilot program established for reactor construction. Pilot program. And operation. Well, you can't just do it all in one facility. You're talking about massive infrastructure in order to bring any of this even close to fruition, even to be able to see the start line. You're going to have to spend $1 trillion right here. With the goal of 3 reactors reaching criticality, that doesn't make any sense. So are they just trying to suck in investors or something? It's like the script of a horror movie. Only it's real. The goal of 3 reactors reaching criticality by the 4th of July. The goal of 3 reactors reaching criticality by the 4th of July. I just can't get past that statement. What are you talking about? Like what are you talking about, man? What? I didn't even get my telephone number tonight. I'm Dana, by the way. Hey, blah, blah, blah. Hang on here, I smurfed it up. You can call in at 709-589. We're in Canada, 4406. I don't hide away from anybody. I've never hid away from anybody. I stand by my words. I'm not a coward. I'm going to call it like I see it. Not like I see it, but like I can prove it. And back up the things I say with the documentation on like the nuclear industry. How's the nuclear industry? Give us a call there, nuclear industry. Come on, I know you're out there. Give me a call, 709-589-4406. All lines are currently open. And I want to hear how you're going to have 3 reactors reaching criticality by the 4th of July 2026. I want to hear that one. I want to know what that one is. That one bugs me. Come on, you can do it. Let's keep rolling. They're not calling. All these years we've been doing this. There will also be action taken consistent with applicable law to use all available authorities to eliminate or expedite the department's environmental review for authorization, permits, approval, leases, and any other activity requested by an applicant or potential applicant. Imagine if they'd done this for geothermal energy. Just imagine if they took this route for geothermal. You would have 30 geo plants up and running, geothermal energy plants up and running by July the 4th of 2026. You won't have any nuclear up and running on July the 4th, 2026. All right? Okay? All right? Hang on here. These kooky whack jobs. So if you took all this energy, time and effort, monetary, and authority, and put it on geothermal, you wouldn't have a problem next year. All your problems would be solved, and that'll be the end of it, right? That's the heartache and heartbreak of this particular story. You give nuclear all you want, you always did. They always get everything they want. They always got everything. They own the universities, they own the medias, they own the stock markets. They still can't produce anything. Hello? 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 Anybody out there besides you guys? Hang on here. You know what I'm saying though, right? Come on, man. I'll do this again. Won't you let me try? There we go. Let me just show you one of the technologies. So if you took all this energy, time, and monetary, and propaganda, and put it towards geothermal, you'd have a geothermal renaissance right away. Let me see what I've done wrong here. I got to go a bit higher. Here we go. Geothermal. Geothermal energy could be cheaper to access thanks to new drilling technologies. It's already being used prolific now. Just the so-called small versions of geothermal heat and cool for your house. So if you drill down 200 feet, and they do this everywhere, dirt cheap. But you have these new heat exchangers now. You can just attach to your house. They're pretty impressive, right? Reduce your electricity supply by 3/4 a month for like a $1,900, $2,000 investment. Hang on. Currently, drills penetrate hard rock at a rate of 1 to 2 meters per hour. The new technique up to 10 meters per hour. And they're going to be using pneumatic. You can reduce the costs by 65%. So they're using high pressure water jets, 25,000 pounds per square inch ahead of the drill bits. And then they have pneumatic hammers. So you got 25,000 pound per square inch cutting bits. We'll just slice the rocks. And it'll slice anything down there. It doesn't matter how hot it is, hard it is, it's going to slice at 25,000 pounds. Then they have pneumatic hammers at the same time will pound that and turn it into like almost a powder. Then they inject water at the same time and they vacuum up the stuff, and then the drill bit is right behind it. And so they can. This new technique is incredible, right? And if you just mass produce this material, you're in business. Like that, it's that simple. But no, we're going to spend trillions of dollars in the nuclear industry, not get nothing out of it, only pollution and everything else. And it's so much cheaper, right? Geothermal. Hang on here. So 10 meters an hour instead of 2 or 3. Let's keep going get back to the story here. So they're priming the rocks for easier breakage, right? They're 26,000 pounds per square inch slicing the rocks. Then they have pneumatic hammers at 1,000 pounds per square inch busting up the chopped up pieces. They have water now, water being ejected and vacuumed up at the same time, so they remove all the debris ahead of them. And then anything left is getting hit with the drill bit. And they also have other companies with similar types of advances, different than that again, right? Where they actually aerosol the rocks, turn it into vapor. So they can get down to the depth. Imagine if you took this executive order and applied it to geothermal, problem would have been solved. The whole world would have shit their pants because somebody finally got it right. See? You're going to blow that opportunity on a disease factory where you're going to put reactors everywhere, guarantee catastrophic events just from the reprocessing of the fuels. The executive order, back to that other story from the World Nuclear News, the lobbying group, that's explaining what the orders means that Donald Trump... We got 100 headlines coming up right after we get through this story. We're just going to boot through them. Good times tonight, folks. We got a great show for everybody. The executive order, well, a very informative show. Order in the reform of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission says that between 1954 and 1978, the U.S. authorized the construction of 133 since completed civilian nuclear reactors at 81 plants. So they did do it at one point, right? They created 133. That was but they got, they removed all the regulatory laws and everything in order to pull this off. Since 1978, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has authorized only a fraction of that number. No. There was only 2 reactors since 1978. Not a fraction of 133, but 2 reactors. Why would you put that narrative, only a fraction of that number since 1978? Only 2 reactors have come along. That's not a fraction of the number. That's an irrelevant fraction of the number. And these came in 4 times over budget and took them twice as long as the projection to build. And they still have huge issues. If proposed, the Nuclear Non-Regulatory Commission, which is the most appropriate term for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission now, they're not even a rubber stamp anymore. They're just like, get out of the way. They don't even matter anymore, which is perfect. They love it. They're sitting there smoking their caviar, drinking their caviar, smoking their cigars. Working with the Department of Government Efficiencies, reorganized the Non-Regulatory Commission to promote approval of licenses, including a deadline of no more than 18 months for final decisions on an application to construct and operate a nuclear reactor. So, and the license they don't have to have the whole license application in on top of that, which is unheard of. Because you're talking about 2 million pieces of paper. And you need that in order to make a determination whether the reactor is going to be safe. So you're talking about new reactors that have never been built before, using a fuel that they've never created before in the country, and that is going to be at high levels, that they're going to be using their fuel to produce plutonium mixed oxide fuel instead of trying to come up with a repository, and then a repository for whatever's left over. It's not backwards, it's just what is going on here. They just hijacked the future of humanity, now and is compromised for sure. To operate a reactor of any type, construct and operate a new reactor of any type. Yeah, put a giggling pin over there. I don't like it right there. It doesn't look right on the picture. Oh, okay, boss. It's going to melt down. It's okay. We're allowed to melt down now. Commencing with the first required step in the regulatory process, a deadline of no more than 1 year for the final decision on an application to continue operating an existing reactor of any type. But you can't quantify that. These are massive sites, man. The reactors have a limit typically because of the neutron bombardments, the Wigner effects, the beta rays, the gamma shines, the alphas, the neutrons are destroying the integrity of these high-pressure reactors. Hence the word stupid, because the high-pressure reactor, you're talking about 1,000 pounds per square inch, and the metal becomes not just fatigued, but brittle. So imagine blowing your car tire to 1,000 pounds per square inch. Guess what happens? If you're lucky, you just get a fat lip and a black eye. And the majority of you are not going to be lucky. You're going to be unlucky, very unlucky. Well, that's what you're doing with these reactors. Now you're going to run them to the ground, where you know that they're going to give, like the refits of a reactor, you're talking about maybe $10 billion because of that particular facet. Answering questions from reporters, of all people who know nothing about reactors, after signing the order, President Trump said that the nuclear was safe and clean. Saying that doesn't make it safe and clean. It's never been safe and clean. It can't be safe and clean. It's nuclear, for goodness sakes. That's what they said about Fukushima, safe and clean. And they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout in 3% of the Fukushima prefecture. But the food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade because it has no ability to be safe and clean. Once you take the fuel out, it's always splitting atoms into your environment. This is the worst case scenario for a planet. It's the worst thing can happen to a planet is fuel has no containment because you're splitting atoms. Instead of for 1 million homes and businesses, you're releasing it directly into the environment. It's still splitting at each reactor core, and there could be 8 in the fuel pools at the top of each building. Each one of them is still splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses. That's why fuel is dangerous for millions of years, because it's splitting atoms. These are perpetual machines. They really do exist. They're man-made. They're called reactor cores. Trump says that the nuclear was safe and clean. Dana says they're not. So who are you going to believe? Somebody who knows nothing about nuclear like Trump, or someone like me who covers it as often as I can? I think you'd be best leaning in my favor if you're smart. Aim to build small modular reactors. Yeah, of course you are, because how are you going to build them? Right? You got 100 companies in the last 6 years fired up to try to crack the code. You still haven't worked it out. None of them are actually with an application into the regulatory agencies because it's all about a money grab. And it's a money grab. You got 100 fusion companies started up in the same time. None of them have an application into the regulatory agencies for licenses, which is 2 million pieces of paper, by the way. Aim to build small. So you're going to need 400, 500, 600 people to go through those papers. Now, in order to get through it, you're going to have to hire 2,000 people to go through the papers. You don't have that manpower in the nuclear industry to dedicate to each application. For the regulatory agency to quantify it, they got to go through the application. And then how do you coordinate 2,000 people in such a short period of time for a consensus? Aim to build small modular reactors. Well, the reactors that you want to build is the boiling water reactor X300, which is the Canadian ones they're allegedly going to build. These are 240-foot buildings. Half of it's underground, but it's still like a 13-story building underground. 13 stories underground and 11 stories above the ground. So they're 240-foot buildings. They got nothing to do with small modular reactors. We're talking about an enormous amount of precious metal and resources and everything else and people necessary. Where are you going to get this manpower to build 3? let alone 300. Where is that coming from? You know why South Korea and France are building all the reactors and Rosatom in Russia? Because nobody else has the manpower or the resources or the infrastructure. You can't just, this is not the type of infrastructure you can just pull out of thin air. But we'll build the big ones too, he said. So what? Who cares what Trump said? He's not a nuclear academic. He's not a nuclear scientist. He doesn't know anything about nuclear. You're not going to build jack shit. It took you 17 years to build your last 2 reactors, and Westinghouse went bankrupt. Among the and 4,500 businesses didn't get paid that worked on the reactors. Small companies that lost their shirts or went bankrupt. Among those attending the Oval Office event was Nuclear Energy Institute President and CEO Maria Kosnick, the skank itself. CEO skank Maria Kosnick. Article researched and written by Alex Hunt. Wow, they put their name on a story. That's pretty rare, man. All these years of covering the degenerate, disgusting world nuclear news, it's pretty rare to see anybody put their name on a story. Did a good job on the story. He didn't spin it too much, did he? Well, he just regurgitated what the executive order was. The goal of reestablishing the United States is the global leader. What the hell is a leader, Dana? I don't know. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. In nuclear energy, he's a global leader. That sounds better than trying to call him a leader in nuclear energy. The United States is a global leader in nuclear energy. What are you, retarded or what? You got no infrastructure. You don't have a million companies to build the infrastructure. It's all speculative. You don't have any applications into the regulatory agencies even, but you're going to have 3 reactors up and running by July the 4th of next year. You guys were all on Ritalin when you were kids of it. This is a radioactive plume based on 19.5 days from the Norwegian Institute of Research of Radioactive Fallout from Japan. Do you live anywhere on planet Earth? If you did, you got poisoned by Fukushima. Building 1,000 reactors in the United States. The Global Snail, the Global Mail, scum of them, the Canadian scumbags. Nuclear energy stocks, of course, they pumped the Fukushima stocks, or uranium stocks post-Fukushima 3 times a week, non-stop. And uranium was diving straight down, crash and burn on the ground. And they were promoting them 3 times a week. You got to buy it. It's the best time now. Go grab your stocks. They were buying them for pennies and selling them for the unsuspecting investors and cashing in every 2 or 3 weeks. Source: Trump prepares executive orders. Motley, and he took it from the Motley Fool, which got bought up by a big venture capitalist, right? Which was not surprising because he told so many lies. So the only thing America is good at right now is killing whales, apparently, because they got so many whales dying on their coastline from Fukushima. You got an epidemic of emaciated whales showing up on the coastline. Nuclear. Here we go. We got 100 of these headlines to get through. Nuclear stock surges after Trump signs order to boost the industry. Trump signs an order to boost the industry, but so what? We like, why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms is one of the biggest questions. But just because you sign an executive order, you don't have a supply chain, you don't have applications into the regulatory agencies to pre-approve or just to rubber stamp it anyway. You don't have an infrastructure to build the reactors. Right, the stocks went up, as you clearly see, but that doesn't, like, remember, like, a single nuclear power plant broke down in Japan, and the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade, half the country. Which was, I'll never understand why the entire country wasn't banned, because when you march across the country with the documentation, that's what you would have done. Trump seeks to boost the U.S. nuclear power rollback, Al Jazeera regulations. And so all of these headlines showed up in a 5-hour period. There was 100 headlines from all the biggest medias worldwide came here, woo, ooh, 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 coming here celebrating the death of humanity and the 8 million species. Government data, U.S. was hit with the worst fallout the year after Fukushima began. Radioactive cesium spiked to the highest levels ever recorded in the history of the EPA's radiation network, and they hid it from everybody. You really think they won't do it again? Do you really think they won't do it again? Trump signs an executive order to spur the U.S. nuclear energy renaissance. There will be no nuclear renaissance in the United States or anywhere else. There is none. It's the same gigawatts today as there was in the 90s. The real goal was downplaying the damage to the Pacific from Fukushima. Plans to boost nuclear energy sends industry shock soaring. I suppose it did. You sent out there was over 100 in the first 5 hours. It didn't stop, but in the first five hours, I grabbed 100 headlines and I gave up on it. And this is Forbes, of all Forbes. You don't get more pro-nuclear than Forbes. This was the American government's animation showing the oceans all along the United States West Coast contaminated with radioactive fallout by the end of March 2011. No, we need a nuclear renaissance data. Oh, okay. Trump seeks to fast-track nuclear licenses, overhaul regulatory agencies. You're going to fast-track licenses to get you got destroyed by radioactive fallout and hid it away from the population. Does that mean it didn't happen? Do you think that there's just nosebleeds from this stuff or something? Radioactive iodine 131, Pennsylvania, at 3,300% above the federal drinking water standards. And they covered it up, right? Trump plans for fast-tracking nuclear power takes aim at the regulators. It didn't take aim at that, but this was the media gloating, and they're gloating for the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry is writing the headlines, not the newspaper, by the way. Most of these headlines were written by the International Atomic Energy Agency itself and is given to the media to publish, but not the headlines like this. Radioactive iodine in San Francisco, 18,000 times above federal drinking water standards. What do you think? If it turns to fairy dust tomorrow or next year or next decade, give you a head of shake. It's not just iodine 131. You already destroyed your country. Why are you going to do it again? Trump to sign orders to boost nuclear power as soon as Friday. Well, that was Friday. Trump seeks to fast-track new nuclear licenses, overhaul regulatory agencies. No, he signed an executive order basically tying their hands, which they're happy to do. They needed that order so that they don't get the blame for all the accidents that are going to happen, all the releases and all the deaths. And updated with the video study, the authors now 20,000 excess United States deaths after Fukushima, not 14,000. So you had a spike in heart attacks that you never seen before post-Fukushima. That was Jeanette Sherman and Joseph Mangano. And that was early, right? That original study came out early. That was just a couple of the states that showed an extra 20,000 people dying of heart attacks, a spike compared to any other year and month. Trump signs executive order to boost the nuclear power. Yahoo News, of course. Speeds up approval. All of those headlines were the first 5 hours, which was pretty impressive. Alaska professor on the radio, Fukushima fallout a suspected factor in the unusual mortality of seals and walruses. Yeah, just give me 1 second here. All right. We couldn't test for plutonium. S&P 500 nuclear giant stock of the day flashes buy signal on Trump's executive order. Right, so they immediately started pushing uranium stocks and small modular reactor companies. That's a different story. It was oh no, that's an older story. That's right. That was some supporting documentation. The radioactive legacy of the Cold War. Hanford, 450 billion gallons of radioactive sludge. And this stuff is splitting atoms, dumped directly into the soil. Like, it's hard to appreciate it. And so envision an aquarium 6 feet wide of nuclear sludge splitting atoms, 518 feet tall, wrapped around your entire planet more than once. A wall of nuclear waste 518 feet tall wrapped around your entire planet. No, Dana, everything can fit into a swimming pool, Dana. They dumped it directly into the soil during the Manhattan Project. What you're going to do now with 1,000 reactors is going to be the equivalent. Do you get any idea how nightmarish? But we got 177 tanks. The 450 billion gallons is 1.4 million of those 177 tanks. They dumped 1.4 million tanks into the soil, and ever since they told you they're worried about 177. That's the same nuclear industry that's in charge today. You really think they're not going to do the same thing? That's what they're saying. That's what Trump just said. You can do whatever you want, which to the nuclear industry means they can do this again. Horrible medical mysteries, alarming rates of birth defects. There was one graveyard up there by Hanford where that I just showed you that story, where 700 children with deformed heads are in a single graveyard up by Hanford. I wonder what could cause that besides nuclear. Nothing. U.S. plutonium facility might blow up. That's Hanford. 450 billion gallons dumped directly into the soil. These are absurd numbers. Why, Fluor Corporation, which has been around for like 120 years, has got most of the contracts at Hanford. Never done nothing at Hanford ever since. Billions of dollars a year from Hanford, and they don't do nothing there. Centrus Energy and Denison mine stocks just went nuclear. Think about this statement here. It tends to concentrate in the testicles. 360 atoms of radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per day may be inhaled by Californians after Fukushima. Gee, I wonder why there's a spike, a massive increase of autism and Down syndrome and schizophrenia and heart problems, liver problems and lung problems, respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia. Area in New York after Fukushima exceeded 3,400 microsievert per cubic meter of iodine-131 gas. Becquerels per cubic meter. Trump orders changes to nuclear power regulation in a bid to satisfy AI energy demand. Why not? If you put all this energy into geothermal, put all this monetary, all this deregulatory. You don't need a deregulatory, by the way, to make this happen for geothermal. You can give geothermal all the regulatory you want to. It's still not going to slow you down because it's harmless to produce. To satisfy energy demand, AI energy demand. Why is nuclear? He ordered the changes to satisfy AI. But couldn't we do it with something else? Is AI that fundamental, that critical that we have to destroy the Northern Hemisphere? Strawberries, mushrooms, and cesium-137 found in Northern California. 5 of the 6 items in the food chain sampling tested have radioactive particles. Not just atoms, but actual physical particles, even worse. Inside the United States nuclear energy landscape as Trump seeks to fast-track reactor approvals. So the media was brutal. In the first 5 hours, those headlines. And these are, when you see this one, like this stuff here, this is legacy headlines of Fukushima. State of Arizona, 131 in the Phoenix milk at 500% the EPA's safety limits for anywhere in the continental United States. You should have abandoned all your places where this is found. You should be abandoned. It's not just, if you got iodine, and you've seen all the other isotopes I showed you at the beginning, you can't just have iodine. That's the cover story. Iodine's brutal, don't get me wrong, but that's the cover story. Nuclear stocks surge after Trump signs an executive order to boost the industry. It just won't work. They're just going to rob all the resources they can get their hands on. They're not going to actually build anything. I'll guarantee it to you. U.S. Berkeley professor claims no matter what happens in Fukushima is not going to be a problem in the United States. U.S. government, any kind of release in Japan would not be detectable here. You had 220 million atoms per liter of radioactive fallout of iodine-130 or 129, for goodness sakes. Trump signs an executive order to boost nuclear power and speed up approvals. Like, how can you speed up approvals for something with such catastrophic consequences? How How can you justify something like that? Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. The rain in California had way more than 10 times more radioactivity, by the way. It was the same thing for Taiwan, too. They closed the schools in Taiwan because of the radioactive plumes. In Canada, United States, they said you should go outdoors and play. A jump in nuclear stocks, Bloomberg. Yet after Fukushima, radioactive iodine-131 in the rainwater samples near San Francisco, 18,000% above the federal drinking water standards. Trump orders a faster build-out of a nuclear power plant. The nuclear industry is incapable of doing anything fast. Name one thing the nuclear industry done fast. You can't do it. It doesn't exist. Radioiodine-131, Pennsylvania, 3,300% above federal drinking water standards. So the plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium would have been the same. You should have abandoned Pennsylvania, and you still should, because of Fukushima. And why would you build all these reactors in your country where you're going to guarantee perpetual emissions from all these sites? It's a death sentence for every species, not just Americans. Trump looks to jumpstart American nuclear power with the latest executive order. I think that's a proper way to frame the narrative. Looks to jumpstart the nuclear power, but it won't. How can it? It doesn't. Like, we've seen it over and over and over. You threw all the money at the nuclear industry you'd ever wanted. Biden done it. Everybody else done it. You gave them everything they ever wanted. You gave them. They own the universities, they own the governments, they own the media, they own the banks. They can't bring anything to fruition. This was their whining and sniveling, crying they've been doing for many years. Oh, well, we just don't have the money. Of course you do. You just steal everything. Do you really think the current generation of inbreeds in the nuclear industry, the entitled lot, whose parents and grandparents and great-great-great-grandparents were all pro-nuclear scumbags, that leached and scammed and stole from the taxpayers, this current generation of useless tits that haven't developed anything, they haven't come up with any designs on their own, all their designs are based on old designs. You really think for even a billionth of a second that they're going to try? Like, you're an idiot if you think they're actually going to try. No offense. I'm just saying, like, if you watch this whole show, at this stage here now, you know what I'm saying is true. Trump looks to jumpstart American nuclear power with the latest executive order. New York Times contributor confirmed California rainwater 181 times above drinking water standards. You got any idea? That means you're supposed to abandon California. It's not just iodine. When you hear iodine, you got, and I showed you the studies at the beginning, right, of plutonium, of neptunium, of cesium-137. These are catastrophic numbers. Xenon-133, hydrogen peroxide, buckyballs, like an absurd amount of documentation. Not conjectures, not opinions. Back. Ordering the reform of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Regulatory Commission completely compromised. They already showed you. They gave NuScale a license. They gave ultra safe nuclear a pass. They both basically went bankrupt. They both robbed their investors. Do you really think that the people that are investing in the last couple of days because of this headline are not going to get robbed? I got to use the other one. My apologies. Hot radioactive particles in Seattle at 50% the levels in Tokyo. So just that headline alone means you're supposed to abandon Seattle even today. Radiation is not going to go away, so just give me a second here. My throat's a little scratchy because I'm laughing. We was laughing at the nuclear industry. Just let me get my glasses finished here. We'll be back on scratch. Holy shit. Hang on a minute. There's some super hot tea here. Maybe that'll cut a hole. Oh. There we go. My apologies. No, I'm going to take me a second. I'll get it right this time. I was rushing too much the last time. There we go. That's better. You need 2 or 3 pairs of glasses sitting there clean, and then you can just change them out. I don't know how it get dirty. My apologies to everybody. Let me go back to that one. Trump signs an executive order bolstering nuclear industry's domestic uranium mining. That's better. Tea was the solution, not water. Ice water is okay. And a copper cup, but... the uranium mining section, there was 500 uranium mines went bankrupt after Fukushima. Latest forecast is all of California on a radiation threat April 6 and 7 shows high levels as high as in Japan. That's not going to go away. That's still here. You just can't detect it with a typical Geiger counter. Like mine up in the corner is looking for gamma and is not even doing a good job of that. And I have an inspector. It's time for nuclear to meet growing U.S. power needs, Trump declares. It doesn't matter what Trump declares. The nuclear industry doesn't have the backbone. They don't have the manpower on it. Fortunately, they don't have what it takes to... They own the university, they own the media, they own the banks, they own the regulatory agencies. They captured all of the agencies. And they're all so corrupt, they're just too lazy. They haven't come up with a new design in 70, 80 years. Their entire legacy is predicated upon old designs and lies. Kansas air filters had iodine-131 above the highest levels detected in California by UC Berkeley. I got an entire folder on how Berkeley, like I say, a couple of weeks ago, we came out and audited Harvard University, Stanford University, MIT. We still got a lot to do. But we've done those 3 universities in 3 days where we audited their presentation at post-Fukushima videos. And my goodness, the lies they told, the misrepresentation they told was, I mean, it's quite telling, right? And this was another model by the Norwegian Institute for Air Research of xenon-133. Now, the study out of Seattle was 450,000 atoms of xenon-133 per cubic meter or per square meter radioactive fallout disposition on the ground. And purple is the color you get if you burn potassium. And so it's very dishonest when you see that color. That's an inappropriate color to use. Potassium doesn't come from nuclear meltdowns or nuclear reactors. Trump signs a nuclear power order to challenge China and fuel artificial intelligence data centers. Because nothing else can fuel a data center on a nuclear. It doesn't matter. You can sign one of these every other week. The nuclear industry is incapable. It's too lazy. It's too entrenched with just ripping off the system. 90% of the money has always, traditionally, as long as I can quantify, as long as we know the nuclear industry has stole 90% of the money through administration. Particularly, it's very blatant when you look at the cleanup, the Superfund sites. They don't accomplish anything, but they chew through billions and billions of dollars each year. We yet to have nothing to show for it. They're just, that's just who they are, right? They're inbreeding. It's taken to a different level. Controversy after the United States government estimates show 40,000 microsieverts, 40 millisievert thyroid doses for California infants. Data not released to the public. Yeah, it's not just a high dose, it's a catastrophic dose. Eh? Oh, but don't worry, Dana. Nuclear stocks surge on report of Trump's executive order. And you had 100 of these stories. This was Canadian CTV. You had 100 of these stories. in the first 5 hours. I was like, oh, this is crazy. And I was trying to capture as many as I can. And I was on the 1 hour news cycle. And I used to, once I captured everything on the page, I would refresh the page again. And so each time I done it, I would take the URL and put it in the folder. That way I wouldn't, if it showed up as a copy, then I wouldn't take a screen capture, right? And I was just curious how much would show up in the first few hours. And it was over 100. And so I added in supporting documentation of why nuclear is not such a great idea after all, in between each of them current stories, right? Just the yin and the yang, so to speak, right? I just lost my spot. Hang on here. 12,000 atoms per square meter of iodine, of gamma. But you can't just have, for every iodine 131, you're going to have 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more. Oh my goodness, I just lost my spot. So we know we've done this one. Let's work backwards from there. Yeah, we've done that one. Yeah, we've done that one. We've done this one. That was one of the more recent ones, right? And that one, that was somewhere around there. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, it was right here, this area. Nuclear stocks surge. Trump signs an executive order on nuclear energy production regulations. NBC News. And remember, Fukushima followed damage to thyroid glands of the California babies 5,000 miles away. This was documented in infant mortality too, by the way, in Canada, United States, post-Fukushima. Trump signs executive orders to boost the nuclear reactor build-out as the United States aims for nuclear renaissance. These are very dishonest. This is NukeNet, so you can expect it out of those guys. But that's a very dishonest nuclear renaissance, because that takes many decades to come to fruition, right? Because they're going from scratch. So, radioactive iodine 131 levels in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts exceeded the maximum contaminated levels permitted in drinking water, but they didn't stop people from drinking the water. And so when your thyroids are aggregating all the anthropogenic man-made isotopes, you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. So all the children, you expect to see in increments over a decade or two catastrophic health issues manifest. And it's going to typically manifest in the children quicker. Trump signs executive order to boost nuclear energy and reduce oversight. Again, you see that connotation of reducing oversight. And according to the World Nuclear News story we covered earlier, they're gutting oversight. Don't look at me, we're ugly. That's what the nuclear industry can do from here on out. We saw plutonium from Fukushima out in New Mexico. Local and regional contamination of plutonium in the environment have resulted from nuclear accident. Like the evidence, this is a crazy idea, or I should say stupid idea, is pretty overwhelming. The nuclear industry, too late, nuclear industry already signed the executive order. It's rob. And so this displaces real solutions, right, by putting your hopes and dreams in something that's not even came to fruition. Rather, like if you took the same energy and said, okay, we're going to do this with geothermal, which was the promise that he made when the day after he was elected, he came out and said they're going to build 50 to 90 gigawatts of geothermal. And so if they had to come out with this enthusiasm, you would see geothermal companies would get all these investors, and we would be on our way to solutions. You can get rid of gas, oil, and coal and nuclear in about 10 years. But instead, you're gonna try to come in on something that doesn't even exist. 100 companies with different designs, which means there's no consensus. Excuse me. Trump signs executive order aimed at easing regulations on and expanding nuclear energy production. That's the worst thing you can do to the nuclear industry. They're already unbelievably complacent and lazy. University researcher, Portland area topsoil with 8,000 picocuries per kilogram of cesium from Fukushima. Over 10,000% higher than the highest levels found by UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley, man, they stabbed you folks in the back. Holy shit. Every single study they looked at, they stabbed you in the back. Trump wants more nuclear power plants. Nuclear stocks will surge. Oak, Low, and NuScale. Neither one of them have an application into the regulatory agency. Neither one of them are going to try to build a reactor. So why would you invest in them? How are you going to get your money back? How does that actually work? Like, putting your money in nuclear stocks right now is idiotic. They're at the farthest point you can possibly get from a nuclear renaissance. Give them 10 or 15 years and see if they actually start to make any headway. And then maybe. I would never invest in nuclear. It would be absurd when you have so many better solutions. It's a total betrayal, but the reality of it is it's not going to come to fruition, is it? California nuclear plant detected 4,000% more iodine-131 than the UC Berkeley. You can't just have iodine-131, you got to have it all. Trump signs an order to speed up nuclear energy research and deployment. Listen, they already got 100 companies out there sucking and raking in money from unsuspecting investors and the government. They're throwing money at these companies, but there's not coming to with any product. How is more money going to change that? Right? They all got a different design. What does that tell you? It's like you say you got to build a new car, but you can't build a 4-wheel car anymore. It has to be 1 wheel or 3 wheels or 5 or 10 wheels, but you can't build a 4-wheel car anymore. And everybody's like, well, why can't we build a 4-wheel car? Well, because we want a car renaissance, a manufacturing renaissance. It makes zero sense. It's like saying every motorcycle got to have training wheels. It's just, why? Like, what are you talking about? The best way to get me killed, send me out there on a high-speed machine with training wheels. Can't make a turn. Excuse me. Let's keep it rolling here. We're doing pretty good. Just could Trump sign an order that's been blown out of proportion now for a couple of days. It's not going to slow down anytime soon on top of that. Boulder, Colorado is a hotspot for Fukushima fallout, radioactive fallout. You should have banned in Colorado. Oak, Low, and other nuclear stocks surge in White House executive order, but they don't have a product. Why would their stocks surge? Because you had over 100 major media come out with a bullshit story, and all the unsuspecting mom and pops who worked all their life now are going to be robbed because Trump is insane, right? Arkansas melt 300% above the EPA maximum contamination levels for radioactive iodine-131. Trump seeks nuclear safety overall. None of that. Like, all of these stories are meant to lull people into investing in the nuclear industry. That's what that was all about. Amount of radiation, 3 gallons of milk from Hawaii surpasses annual maximum contamination levels set by the EPA. None of these stories told you about Fukushima. None of these stories gave you the other side of the story. All of them gave you the one side. All of them gave you tunnel vision. Study says fallout from nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan may be harming local infants in San Diego. Reforming nuclear reactor testing at the Department of Energy. Right? So they gutted all the regulatory for the nuclear industry. And hopefully the world will come to its senses. Alarming report of Fukushima fallout harming the United States infants, San Diego, ABC. Trump signs an order to overhaul the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, speed reactor deployment. Get rid of all the regulations for the most dangerous industry in human history. How do you think that's going to play out? Really, though, how do you think that's going to play out? What Trump's executive order signing means for nuclear power? It means nothing. Like, all these headlines, they don't mean nothing. Maryland senior scientist surprised over radioactive iodine-131 fallout. A fat red bar on a graph never seen before. Trump don't care. It kills everybody. It's okay because the nuclear industry is happy, right? CC-137 forecast showed surface radiation cloud over Texas on April the 15th and 16th. You really think that went away in less than 300 years? Do you really believe, anybody really believe that? Trump will sign nuclear power orders on Friday, energy chief says. The nuclear hero, the nuclear zero, CC-137 forecast, same one I think actually. Trump guts the nuclear safety regulations, exactly. Rain with 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter fell on the United States. This was a BC study, Canada. But it covered the whole planet. 20 million particles. So you can't just have iodine-131. I showed you a whole bunch of different isotopes would have been in the same sample. This is a catastrophic event. And what? You're going to pollute your entire country from inside your country this time? Nuclear power stocks rise as Trump signs an order to aid the sectors. Progress may be slow. Slow! California iodine-131 probably double or triple what we report. Which was at 20 million atoms per cubic per liter of radioactive rainfall. My goodness, these are absurd numbers, by the way, and it can't just be iodines. Uranium stocks surge as news of Trump's nuclear executive orders. Well, there's no more nuclear reactors on the planet, so why would the stocks surge? The stocks are already way too high. And so now the 14 biggest financial institutions are probably buying those stocks. In a few days, will sell their shares again, a couple of million each, and steal mom and pop's investors' money, thanks to Trump. He just bankrupted millions of people who worked all their lives. Radioactive cesium levels continue to rise in the milk in San Francisco Bay. Don't worry, though, nuclear energy stocks soar as Trump prepares executive orders. The height of Fukushima emergency regions in California where the plume hit had no monitors. They turned them all off. The email showed the Environmental Protection Agency decided not to deploy Radnick to the area, and only one left broke as radioactivity began spiking. In fact, they had volunteers were manning the ones they did have, because the EPA didn't want to do it. Nuclear power stocks rise as Trump signs an order to aid the sector. California nuke plant detected 4,000% more iodine-131 than UC Berkeley after Fukushima. Trump signs an executive order to boost nuclear. Let's just destroy our own country with radioactive fallout, because that's what the time we're doing, right? April 16th forecast showed radioactivity clouds stretching from Texas to Canada. It's okay, though. Trump signed an executive order. That fixes everything. That mitigates 36 reactors melting down in Japan and burying North America in radioactive fallout forever. It's still melting down. You destroyed the Pacific Ocean, for goodness sakes. I launched research expeditions for 6 years. There's some pictures. These were difficult times. We went out for 4 to 5 months a year post-Fukushima. It didn't always look like this either, I can tell you that much. I went out for 6 years. I had to go out for 5 extra years after the first year. This was what it typically looks like out there. That was a typical day for me. And what I would do is I would, the big boat tows the Zodiac tows the small Zodiac, and you just spend all that time researching the coastline. Because the big Zodiac burns a lot of fuel. The little one, I can go a whole week on 2.5 gallons, right? So you got covered in radioactive fallout. I mean, we got buried in it. We got all the documentation of it. And what we discovered on the research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska with 27,000 islands was the species to your left are missing. So I went back for 5 more years to see if the species to the left recovered. The pictures to your right are the pictures I took. The species to your left are exterminated. It's an extinction event. So why would you build more of these death machines? That's what a nuclear reactor is. It's a perpetual... And you know, these species to your left, The official story was they died of cancers that mutated from species to species. Cancer. That's the official story. And the real story of global warming is 80 years of radioactive fallout, and the radiation pulses energy at the speed of light every second. Guess what happens eventually? Me and Zoe. So I spent 6 years researching the coastline for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean, and your species to your left are exterminated. So why would you want to build more of these things? Think about this headline here. Bodies are swollen by cancerous tumors all along the Canadian Pacific coastlines, allowing cancer to spread from one species to another like a virus. So the species to your left were exterminated to pass cancer on to each other post-Fukushima. I've never heard tell of cancer linked to invertebrates without backbones and kelp and algae and clams and mussels and scallops and abalones and gooey ducks and razorback clams and starfish and sea anemones. I never heard tell of that pre-Fukushima ever. But that's the official story, is the species to your left. Now all the pictures I took of the ones I did find, which was pretty rare, were full of tumors. You can find that on my site, right? Let's keep her rolling here. And we're not... Nuclear stocks rallies Trump signs executive order to support nuclear. Unprecedented 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur, peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs per cubic meter of air. Trump signs an order to boost nuclear energy. It doesn't matter. You already gave them everything. Like Biden gave them everything they ever hoped for, everything they ever dreamed of, all the money they ever wanted. They still couldn't do nothing with it. They gave them all the passes. The regulatory agencies were told just to pass them. Washington air monitors show sustained radiation spike on March the 31st, then goes out of service. The same city with iodine 131 in the drinking water. Like the cover-up in the United States was after Fukushima was same as Canada, was horrifying cover-up. Radiation data from Seattle survey may be withheld by the feds. I wonder why. Donald Trump signs an order. Trump signs an order to revive the non-nuclear industry. Nuclear energy stocks soar as Trump prepares executive order. Trump sparks uranium frenzy. So this is all, those big head, not this one, but those type of headlines coming up in a second here. There was over 100 of them in the first 5 hours of that story breaking. Over 100 of them like that. So I put in headlines like this to remind you that Fukushima was an event. And the last thing you want to do is take away the regulatory agencies and then build massive amounts of these disease factories everywhere. That is going to turn out very bad right away. Trump signs order to boost the U.S. nuclear energy. In order for them to make the fuel, which they're going to get a kick at right away, apparently, is the releases into your communities and your fresh water and your country is catastrophic. From the plutonium mixed oxide reprocessing. It's absurd how much release we're talking about. Trump signs an executive order, so don't worry about it, Dana. Cesium iodine is 600% above the EPA's maximum levels in Hawaii. You should have abandoned Hawaii. Trump signs an executive order, so don't worry about it, Dana. Very high concentrations of hot particle, including plutonium and americium. You're supposed to abandon North America post-Fukushima. Why would you build these death factories in your country for? Trump orders fast track for U.S. nuclear licensing to power AI boom. Again, you see that connotation that we've been seeing since the AI narrative showed up there about a year ago. Well, we can't do it unless we build all kinds of small modular reactors, so let's get after it. There is no nuclear renaissance. It's the same gigawatts today as it was in the 90s. it's a total Ponzi scheme to come out and sign an executive order for something that has no hope of a nuclear renaissance. But it might embolden them to pollute your country even worse than they already have, and they've done it pretty rough. If you watch this whole video, you know what I'm saying is true. Nuclear power experts striking that the radioactive iodine-131 in California rainwater is far above the permitted levels in drinking water. Should have abandoned California. Trump signs an executive order to boost nuclear power. Latest forecast of California under radiation threat. But Trump signed an executive order, so don't worry about it. The West Coast bird die-off is biggest ever recorded. The stomachs were completely empty. Unprecedented in size, scope, duration. It was millions of birds, of common murres and other species, but over 1 million common murres. They dive 600 feet all day. They feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill. But at the same time was 1.4 million Cassini auklets heading to Australia on the migratory route. And they showed up emaciated. And what was interesting about that is common murres dive 600 feet all day. It was over 1 million of them showed up emaciated. The Cassini auklets are microscopic feeders. So you had common murres feeding on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, diving 600 feet all day long. And then the other species in equal numbers and over 1 million of Cassini auklets showing up, and they eat the microscopic, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton. So you have two different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated over thousands of miles by the millions. And it wasn't just those two species. And a complete failure of all of their breeding grounds on top of that. Oklo leads nuclear rally. So they don't even have a reactor application into the regulatory agency. They're not even trying to build a reactor. They haven't even acquired the team to build something like the engineers, the infrastructure, and why are their stocks climbing? They don't have a product. Why are they on the stock exchange? It's disgusting what we're seeing happening. Alarm over very sick animals washing ashore in Alaska. Fish bleeding from the face, bloody entrails. We're very aware of Fukushima. We're almost through. Nuclear power. 100% death rate of baby seals on the California coastline. Starving. Suffering from a shortage of food. I was on the ocean doing research expeditions during that. And you can approach the seals. They didn't even, right up to them, slap them in the face. They wouldn't run away. No hair on their body. Emaciated. But don't worry, Trump signed an executive order. Forget about the graveyards of dead animals emaciated. Trump signed an executive order. Forget about the mind-blowing die-off. Beaches full of bodies. Forget about all that. Let's just get nuclear and everything will be better. Name one thing that nuclear ever made better. Nothing. One Fukushima may destroy a whole country. Collapse of a whole country is possible. It should have collapsed. Japan definitely should have collapsed. They covered it up with the help of all the legacy medias worldwide. Does the latest nuclear stock rally have legs? Of course not. Xenon 133 in Washington, 450 times above detection levels. Persisted for weeks. These are catastrophic numbers. Everybody in every species got poisoned. It's permanent. Trump's going to boost regulations, so 360 atoms of sulfur per day inhaled by Californians. I can show you all the evidence in the world. And I can also tell you one other thing. The nuclear industry will never see a renaissance again. The industry is just too gobblish to even get it together. And it's not just iodine-131. There's 1,000 isotopes you need to worry about. Don't worry, Trump signed an executive order. And because you spread so much radiation, it came out that the slower you spread the radiation dose, the more effectively it produces cancer and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. Now, uranium stocks roar. I mean, there was a huge push, wasn't it? None of them, not a single one of those 100 stories even acknowledged Fukushima happened. Carbon buckyballs covered the entire planet in just 20 to 30 days. These are all hot particles we're talking about. This is why we see an extinction event playing out worldwide post-Fukushima. This is why we see weather events post-Fukushima. This is why we see the food chain is broken post-Fukushima. Tokyo shouldn't even be inhabited. Everyone here is a victim of Fukushima. I mean, they're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. What does that tell us? And they're shipping it to Canada, United States. Why do you think United States has 74% obesity rates? Because of the stuff I showed you tonight. By the way, obesity after nuclear accident is a sign of radioactive brain damage. Is iodine-131 killing babies in Philadelphia? 48% spike. We've seen that in all kinds of places, that same type of headline. In Canada, too. In the West Coast. Reinvigorating the nuclear industry based Trump. Trump orders relaxation of regulations. Do you got any idea how bad that's going to turn out? Trump orders nuclear revival, slashes red tape. Trump signs order to boost the industry. Nuclear stocks surge. Why would nuclear stocks surge? There's no more reactors in the pipeline. You're going to have to hang on to the money for 20 years to see it to come to fruition. This was the 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet were buying the stocks. That's the way it surged, to try to trick mom and pops into investing their money into this. This is why there was it's a big money grab, right? That's what they do. That's who they are. Being a low life is just natural. Yeah, it's like the Manhattan Project. Where's that to? Let me go backwards. Manhattan Project 2. Where they just dump nuclear waste wherever they feel like it. They just release it directly into the environment because there's going to be no oversight. They just removed all oversight of an industry that is already completely out of control. Big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon, which are fueling the AI demand. Big tech companies. Well, why should we have to use nuclear? And why is small modular reactor the only solution when you don't even have one? If you took all that energy, if you took all that hype and put it behind geothermal, in 5 or 10 years, you would have a future. Now you won't have a future because you ostracize everything now but nuclear. Nuclear is the only thing now that the government will look at, because otherwise there won't be nuclear, right? So they're now going to exclude everything but nuclear. That's called idiot and scumbag in anybody's books, isn't it? Well, here we go again. And one more time for Albert. Just put Albert's picture back up here. Bless his heart, boy. He looks just like I thought he would look. He looks just like I thought he would look. And he's a good friend. We really appreciate him. He put his time in here, I'll tell you that. He's been around a long time. And he was a good guy. Unlike me, I'm a bastard. Albert was actually a good guy. And we will miss him. And that is heartbreaking, no matter how you look at it. But he lived to be 75. And I guess that's reasonable. It's still a terrible thing, right? It's still heartbreaking. Make sure you give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. And we dipped past our typical 2-hour show. Yeah, it's hard to believe Albert's gone. My goodness, eh? He never missed a show, that guy, as far as I know. And I've talked to him on the phone a few times. He was a stand-up guy. He was a farmer, so he would always pipe up when about the insects. We talk about insects. He was able to see it himself, right? So James Lucid got a new song out. He's got 3 songs up. He's sneaky. He's sneaky, that fella. He got 3 songs up already. I listened to the Coal Power and the Full Cycle. And now we just put up slow cookers. And so we're going to play that song. We're going to play that song. I'm going to control the volume on my end. So the song we played at the beginning of the show tonight, that was James Lucett's Enrichment Man, The Enrichment Man. I'll show it to you here in a second, actually. Bless his heart. And just bear with me 1 second here. The Enrichment Man. James had a troll on that video. I sorted him out last night. Scumbag. What a scumbag that guy turned out to be. Hang on here, I'll be right with you. Just got a couple of comments from BKL, as we used to call him, I want to put on the screen. Which was really typified who BKL was. Here we go. BKL. Here we are. The very second comment, yeah, Dana, as I start to show up on Albert. Brady's, I always said hi to everybody. And he appreciated James and let James know it. And James did too, bless your heart. He was a good soul, man. That's the way it is. Nothing we can do about it. He had a massive bleed out in his brain. He never missed a show, man. He was a super nice and very thoughtful person. We'll definitely miss him. So James got out a new song, Slow Cooker. I got the volume. I'm going to switch on and make sure we're in 1080. I'll restart the video. And I ordered in a plasma cutter. Too old. I'm getting too old for the grinder all the time. I have to do all the work myself because the industry has destroyed me. The nuclear industry has beat the shit out of me for so many years. I have to fund everything the hardest way possible. By most of the work, if I can do it, I have to do it myself. I'm just not healthy, right? So I know I complain, but I got a nice machine shop, so I shouldn't complain, I suppose. It's just I'm not healthy. It is what it is. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for putting up some more music, James. Bless your heart, my friend.
No accident, just standard procedure. Taste on the midshift air, badge no chirp, no one cares. Vent stacks dump into the lot. You breathe, you choke, you punch the clock. Clock in sick, shift still grinds. Urine skip, badge realigns. Slow cooker, slow cookers, yeah. No fire, but flesh still steams. Slow cooker, slow cookers, yeah. For decades, silent screams. Dose adjusted, logs erased. Bonus check for what's replaced. Wipe the deck before review. Hazmat lied, no follow through. Said the air was clear as glass while we were breathing weapon class. Record shredded, dose got kicked. Rolodex lies, signatures flicked. He walked into that neutron cell. No mask, no shield, no whistle bell. His daughter born with no face left. 2 holes to breathe, 18 months of death. No cries, no eyes, just pain held tight. That mother held the system's block. Slow cookers, slow cookers, yeah. No blast, just internal war. Slow cookers, yeah.
They said it was clean. They said it was safe. But all along, it was cooking.